If you read articles about the state of local news, you'll come away with a pretty pessimistic view of the industry. But while legacy newspapers have certainly faced a steep decline, there's a burgeoning explosion of local media startups that are innovating in the space. One such company is Overstory Media. What started as a single local newsletter operating in Victoria has since expanded into 14 separate verticals operating all across Canada. In a recent interview, I spoke to CEO Farhan Mohamed about why he got into local news, his company's acquisition strategy, and why he's optimistic about the state of local news. Hello, I'm Simon Owens, and this is The Business of Content, the show about how publishers create, distribute, and monetize their digital content. If you want to listen to an audio version of this show, subscribe to The Business of Content wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, now on to my interview with Farhan. Hey Farhan, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to talk about this company that you run called Overstory Media. But before we get into that, let's talk about how you kind of got interested in media in the first place. Like you started out, like 10 years ago working in the advertising side?
Yeah. About 10 years ago, I worked at a local newspaper that's now part of Post Media and was doing some ad sales relief work one summer. I always wanted to get into media. I didn't know how. And so family friend was working at the paper, knew the guy who was hiring, made a connection, and then one thing led to another. And so that was my first foray into it. Spent a few months there, sold full page ads and quarter page ads, and learned everything about the newspaper industry. And that was my big aha moment that everything is about to hit the fan and things are going to crumble and change and writing's on the wall. And so that was my first step into it.
It's interesting. Most people who want to get into media dream of being a journalist, not working on the business side.
No, I mean, I knew I've never been a good writer. And so I was always more actually interested in advertising. When I was younger, I wanted to work at an ad agency. And so I thought this was like, wow, I'm working at a newspaper and I'm, getting to see what it's like and working with advertisers and all that kind of stuff. So that kind of felt somewhat similar, but also so far different.
And so you get a job at, what is it, like a newspaper chain?
Yeah, effectively Post Media.
Is that a Canadian?
Post Media it's one of the largest Canadian newspaper chains.
So were you selling ads at like the local level, the national level?
Yeah, at the local level in two of the local papers.
So this was post-recession or at the tail end of the recession. You're seeing just like, especially in the U.S., like newspapers are just hemorrhaging jobs, contracting, all that kind of stuff. What did you said you saw the writing on the wall? What were you noticing in terms of like the mistake? Especially now looking back in hindsight.
Yeah.
What were some of the big mistakes that you were seeing these legacy newspapers embrace?
So this was 2012, and at the time, I want to say out of, a team of, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 different, on the ad side of things, I believe there were only two people that were focused on digital. And this was at a time when the internet was already a thing, and online was already a thing, and that was one of the biggest steps or one of the biggest things for me was, there isn't enough focus on digital. And now in hindsight, you look at all of these legacy publications across North America who are still having trouble getting digital and still who don't understand it and just don't know what to do. And so that was some of the inkling that I was feeling.
And also, I get the sense, and this is a theme we might explore later, is like these legacy newspapers, they're very kind of bloated, top heavy, have very high overhead, the kind of things that are like a nimble, local news startup that's succeeding today, there has none of those things.
Yes. Yeah. That's, you first off, you walk into a building and there's way too many desks and it's way too big of a footprint. And, I remember when I then went to my next company, we had a team of like we packed the room, and I think this is part of it, too much. And so it went from one end of the spectrum to all the way to the other side of it. And you have way too many people sitting in one room, but you're producing maybe not the same caliber, but you're producing just as much. And so I think that was some of it where, what do you have in front of you? How much are you spending? Right now, and what I've been able to do now is change up that mindset. Instead of asking the questions, how much money do we need to be, or do we want to be making here? We ask the question, how much do we need to be making? And that really starts from asking, what do we actually need to do the job? What do we actually need to serve the community? So, I take the things that I saw back then, and I'm trying to do things a little bit differently now.
And so you're working there for a little while. You get to understand legacy media, and then you have like a friend or something who's started like some kind of local news blog somewhere.
Yeah, I had been following someone on Twitter, and I mean, I feel like most of my connections are just through DMs on Twitter and Instagram. And I mean, I met my wife through a DM on Instagram. So that's pretty much been my life, is you just know people through social, and then you end up sending them a message. And so I knew a guy who was running a little local blog, and I said, "Hey, let me come and chat with you guys." And so at the time, I thought that this was some big organization, some big company. It was a local blog in Vancouver, and I walked in, and we met at a coffee shop, and realized, okay, this is a passion project. People are meeting on a weekly basis at a co-working space. This is not a proper company. And
What was the
so
motivation for talking to you? Like, was he hoping to get acquired by Post Media, or was it
no,
like
it
he
was the
just wanted to
opposite.
network?
Yeah, it was the opposite. I came in saying, "Hey, I've been selling tens of thousands of dollars every month at this newspaper. Let me come and do the same thing." And so
Yeah.
walking in thinking, "I'm going to sell, make tons of money," and then realizing, "Okay, this is not the case. This needs a lot of work. Let me focus on the processes and procedures." And at the time, if you wanted to write something, it was that simple to just send it in and get published, post it on social. But they were doing things, we were doing things that no one else was really doing in the community. And so we were going in without much knowledge, and we just said, let's just go do it and let's see what happens. So pros and cons to that, but that's generally how it started.
And this was called the Daily Hive.
Yeah. Before that, it was called Vancity Buzz. We rebranded, we took it across the country, but at the time, it was called Vancity Buzz, a little local blog in Vancouver.
And so it was like a very kind of bloggy. Like, it wasn't doing like, was it like, what was it, just kind of curating, or just kind of
Yeah,
like,
lots
what
of
was the
lots of
kind of
curation, lots of like soft news, telling people what's happening. So lots of events, entertainment, a lot of culture, sports, that side of it. And so we weren't really doing any sort of hard news. And then once we started figuring things out a little bit more, we started going down that path. And you realize if you start covering hard news in a city, you start getting page views. And so you say, let's go do more of this because we're gonna, get more advertising revenue from it. And then you start building and building and building from there.
So it's like you, this other guy, and then maybe like a handful of like contributors or something
Yeah,
like
there were
that to
about
start.
there were about three of us really working on it properly in the beginning, and then we started adding more freelancers who barely paid if anything, and at the time like we weren't making much money, and so that
Yeah.
was also part of it. We had no idea what we were doing. We were trying different things out.
And so you came in though and started like building a real business around it, supercharging the ad sales because it was getting like decent traffic.
Yeah, so in the beginning we were doing about 200,000 monthly uniques, and
That's a lot for a city. That's a lot for a city blog.
it was a lot, and so we were commanding a lot of attention, but it was really in this interesting way that no one took us seriously, and that was part of it, where we had this sense that no major players looking at us, which means we're going to fly under the radar. We're going to cover things that no one else is covering. We're going to talk about things that no one else is talking about, and we're going to do it in this like friendly sort of way, which is very very Twitter at the time, 2012, 2013. So that's generally how it started, and then started focusing on ad sales a little bit more. I remember early
How
days when I
easy was it
started.
to sell like local businesses?
So when I started, we were making 5,000 a month in revenue, and we were selling things for like dirt cheap, and that was part of the mindset. Like, let's just go get anyone to come on. And so I remember selling advertorials at the time for $150, and we just wanted to make money. We wanted to just try it and see what happened. And so you start doing that for months, and then you realize, okay, there's an opportunity here. Let's think about what we're selling. We've got these static display ads on the website. You've got advertorials. You have sponsored content. What else is there? How do you price this? And so we went from 150 to $300 to $500 to 750, and then 750 seemed like a lot. But then the page views kept growing, and we said, if the page views are growing, that means that we can charge more. Our socials are growing, we can charge more. So about a year later, we tripled our revenue, and that was the time where we said, okay, I think like we've got something here. let's start taking this seriously.
So, how long did it take you before you started launching in other cities?
Probably a couple years. I think we
Okay.
started in 2014 or 2015. We
And
started with one market.
what was the MO for launching in a new city?
Opportunity. There weren't many that were doing the type of things that we were doing back then, and
Hmm.
so it was, go in, find one person that can write, spin out the website, and then just start social channels. Use your existing network to try to leverage and try to grow and show others that it's there. And part of that MO was also, hey, if we can make this thing even larger and getting to more markets, we have a much larger advertising play. And part of the MO to even go national was part of that is, you had advertisers asking, do you have a national presence? When are you going to be national? When are you going to do that? And so it was I think a significant part of it was motivated by the dollars that were there, but the other side of it was, okay, there's opportunity, there's market opportunity. Let's go see what we can do.
So, what? How many cities did you eventually expand to?
I think 5 in Canada, 2 in the States.
Wow. And it was just kind of like one editor per site, and
Yeah,
then.
one editor or one writer, depending on the city, depending on the size, depending on how much revenue could come in, and so
Mhm.
that kind of dictated a lot of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it stayed very bloggy the entire time.
No, so there was a good change about 2015, 2016. So about a few years into when I was there. And that's when we started hiring proper journalists, trained journalists. And it was always tough. There was people knew us as the blog, as the place to get a certain type of content. But we saw the opportunity, we saw the traffic, and we realized we're telling the news in a bit of a different way. We're using different language. We're being a little more fun. And I always used to say at the time that we were seen more as a friend rather than this news source. And so that allowed us to do things that others couldn't. That allowed us to grow on social. There was a point where we had the most engaging social channels across media across Canada, and and we were really really focused on that, trying to get as many eyeballs, trying to get as much engagement and shares and comments and that sort of thing.
Because that's when like Facebook was throwing gasoline on the fire in terms of the
Oh
algorithm
yeah,
helping
I mean,
pages and stuff like that.
I remember in it might have been 2014. I was at a local business, the board of trade event, and I put my name into a raffle, and I won 20. I think it was $2,500 of credit for Facebook ads. And at the time, we barely had money, so winning $2,500 in Facebook credit was like gigantic. But we invested all of that, I think, over the span of 3 4 months, and this was at a time where you could buy likes for 25 cents, 30 cents. Today, when you see the numbers, you're thinking, I'm spending multiple dollars, sometimes 10 plus dollars. So it was really easy at the time to grow, provided we also had the good content that people wanted to read and share and engage with. So it was like the perfect storm. The algorithm was perfect, the content was perfect, this beast was growing, and we got some credit that went along with it.
Yeah, and then what happened when that spigot got turned off?
Well, we always focused on social, and I think that was, in hindsight, that was both a pro and a con. We didn't spend a ton of money on it, but we spent a lot of time on it, perfecting it, realizing that social is a bit of a science, and you have to think about people's situations. And so, the times that we were posting, how much, and the frequency, we were studying what others were doing, and really watching those sort of things closely. So, it was definitely a pro and a con. Today, I would say, investing heavily on certain social channels is probably not the best bet. It's not your audience; it's someone else's, and you have no
Yeah,
control over it.
and not to put the cart before the horse, but your the company you run now is heavily focused on newsletters and more ownership of audience, right?
Exactly, exactly, and
Yeah.
and that was the motivations are also very different. And so back then, it was very much we're going after page views, we're going after traffic. We want as many readers as possible so that we can command more dollars from that, both from display advertising, the more impressions you get, the more money you make. But also, the more readers we have, the more we can charge for things like sponsored content and contests and partnerships and things like that. Today, it is the drastic opposite of that, where we almost don't care about page views. We almost don't care about social growth and numbers like that. We really care about engagement and interaction. And so for us, it goes down to like niche communities. What kind of market share do we have? Our smallest market right now is 20,000, and we have about a 50% market share there. So we're really, really focused on having real connections with people, providing real value to readers, really trying to make those connections. And so we start things with the newsletter and then we grow from there.
So you left the Daily Hive in what, 2020? What was your reason for exiting?
Yeah, I wanted I wanted a bit of a break. I had been doing this since I was in university, and so going kind of back to 2012, 2013, I was still in university, still getting my business degree, and I remember sitting in classes and writing IOs, insertion orders. I remember writing articles and doing all these things while you're still in class. And so I never really had a break in between anything, which was obviously in hindsight good. Um, but I was getting really tired, and it was this constant struggle, this constant fight. You're playing the game nonstop. And so in my role at the time, I was pretty much doing everything, hands-on on almost everything. We were connected to every story across the country and all of these different markets we were in. At the peak of it, we were publishing about 100 stories a day. And it was, in short, exhausting. And so one part of me said, okay, how much longer is this going to go? There was another piece that my wife was pregnant with my daughter, and I said I kind of want a bit of a break before we welcome a kid into this world. And so this was early 2020. Obviously, no foresight that a global pandemic was coming, but that was some of what it was for me. Is I want to think about what's next for me. I think I've done a lot here. Took it from 200,000 uniques a month to 6.5 million. We were doing about 15, 20 million page views a month. We were doing really well on social. We were writing so much, we were producing so much, we were having so much impact. But there was always a sense in me that I wasn't doing enough for my community. And when I was younger, the way I've grown up, the way I was raised, it's always leave your community better off than you found it. And I always wanted to do more niche and small and have big impact at whatever levels, and small, big, whatever. And so some of the things that I found back then was that it was really hard to get into some communities. And so if I wanted to do something and go into a smaller market, the answer was generally, here's a $500 freelance budget, go see what you can do. Well, $500 freelance budget doesn't really get you anything. You can't really have any sort of impact. You can't really tell proper stories with that. So I had all of these things kind of boiling up. When I was, I think, about 15, 16, I had my own newsletter that I never called a newsletter. I just called it an email 411 that I used to send out to about 100, 200 different people in my big friend circle. And I would just like send an email and tell them, here's what's going on. And so I was struggling to figure out, what's next. I was thinking about my own identity. I've been doing this at this company for about 7.5 years. I've got a kid coming. You kind of put all that together, and I said, I need a timeout. I need a break. And so I said it was time to do something different.
Was there ever talk of of having an official exit for the company in terms of a acquisition or anything like that?
We had been talking about it for like everything was on the table. We were talking about every option, and so we were looking at a number of different things. The company just sold this month in September, and so it's nice to see that that happened, and that it can live on, and things will change and whatever, and then maybe it'll reach its full potential. But we were always looking, and it was always a grind. We were bootstrapped from day one. It was this big grind all the way through.
So, like you said, you couldn't move into more niche communities. Was it only like large cities that the Daily Hive was in?
Yeah, because it was the same thing. How many page views, all that kind of stuff. So we were really focused on the major markets across Canada and a couple in the States we were trying out, and so it was always about big regions. And so in hindsight now, I look and I think thinking about through the pandemic, one of the things that always came to mind and everyone kept saying is that no one has any idea what's happening in their own backyards. And I think it's because most media players are focused on bigger numbers, bigger regions. And, when you're trying to cover 2, 3, 4 million people, what you're forgetting is those small communities of 10,000, 20,000, 50,000. So that was, again, in hindsight, the move made sense. But at the time, I wanted to really have more impact. I wanted to feel like I was doing something more on the ground.
So you end up kind of you just as you found the original site that became the Daily Hive, you end up finding another site, right? That you kind of
Yeah,
tell me
yeah.
about that.
So truthfully, I wanted to get out of media. I did not want to be doing this anymore. I said, I'm not making money. I'm exhausted. The typical media. I'm overworked, underpaid, underappreciated, all of those things. And I said, I really don't want to do this anymore. And so I started having conversations with different people, and everything kind of kept coming back to me. And it was funny because in those 2 months that I took off, I left the company, and then my daughter was born, and I had about 2 months. And I was really struggling to find news and information. And everything was the same thing. Everyone was covering the same stories. Nothing was really too different. And so I said, I personally, I need something different. And I'm always selfish in that way, thinking, well, if I need something, maybe someone else needs something. And so time went on, and I started having conversations. Again, DM'd someone, my now business partner, and he had started something called Capital Daily in Victoria, BC. Uh, and he started as a newsletter. And he said he put some money into hiring some journalists and into acquiring readers. And there was this really killer newsletter. And I said, let's chat. Let's see what you've got going on. And one thing led to another. And I said, I think you're onto something, but I don't think you know what you're doing. And he said, I have no idea what I'm doing. You're right. So we said, okay, let's kind of put these two brains together. I've got the experience on the media and the community side. He's been a tech entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur. And so we said, let's put these two things together. Let's care about local. Let's invest in journalism. He had invested in an investigative reporter. And so all of these things were happening. All these things were coming. And so we said, let's go start this and let's see what we can do together. And let's see if we can change a bit of the industry in the way that it's working. We always talked, I remember at Daily Hive and in the industry, generally we were writing 90% of the stuff we didn't want to so that we could focus on the 10% that we wanted to. You would write about the fluff so you can get the page views and the hits so you can make the money so you can do the things that matter. And everyone kind of kept saying the same thing to me, which was, I'm tired of the stuff that doesn't matter. Why can't we tell bigger stories? Why can't we ask bigger questions? Why can't we throw bigger punches? So I said, what if we did that? What if we focused on just the things that matter and also talk to the community and bring it in that way? I'm someone who is not a journalist by profession. I just happen to get into this industry. So I take the very different mindset of what does the community need? And what is it gonna what does the community need to allow it to thrive? And one of those pieces and one of those pillars is it needs journalism. It needs the right information. It needs truth in order to make decisions. It needs journalism to have a strong democracy, and so that people can go into election booths that are informed. And so I started thinking of it in this mindset that it's not just about the journalism, but it's really about the community. What if we start talking to people? What if we start asking them what they need? And so with Capital Daily, it was a snapshot of what was happening in the city. Everything you need to know right in one daily email. And so we started taking that idea and we started expanding on it. And we started doing that same sort of thing in other markets. And we said, either something exists here and it's not good enough, it's part of a big chain that doesn't really care about local enough and they just want to make money, or nothing exists. Well, if nothing exists, let's go build it. If something exists, can we buy it, make it better? Or maybe something exists that's not good enough and let's go back and build something.
Yeah, and I like this idea of the daily newsletter, especially for local news, because, I think a lot of people, they suffer from guilt that they pay attention to a lot of national news, but not enough local news. And one thing I like about the local newsletters, it's just this, you talked about how with the blog, you had to just churn out so much content to get the page views, but it's just the daily newsletter is just this compressed thing. You read it for a few minutes and then you close it or delete it, and then you're done. You feel like you've done your civil duty of keeping up with what's going on with local news. That's why I really like the Axios DC newsletter for example. And it also took the pressure off you in terms of churning out a ton of content. And like you said, you could start focusing on some bigger stories and stuff like that. How long had the newsletter been going before you joined up?
I think maybe about 2 years, maybe a year and a half,
Oh,
two
wow.
years,
Okay.
something like that.
So
So
it had some traction.
yeah, I think at the time it was about 30,000 subscribers.
Oh,
Today
okay.
it's about
Yeah.
55,000. One out
Mm-hmm.
of five adults locally subscribe.
Mm-hmm.
So, this, yeah, exactly what you're saying. Some of our markets, some of the publications, it's daily, 365 days a year. We've got some that are once a week, some that are twice a week. Depends on the size of the market, depends on, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it really is on what the community wants and needs.
So
So
how do you interact with the community?
so we start by finding the best people that live, work, or play in that community, and we go and we make they're the experts, and we give them the power, and we say, "You tell us what's needed here. You tell us what kind of stories need to be written, what people are talking about, what they care about." Changing this dynamic between the big conglomerates, the way that I see it and the way I've experienced it is that you generally have one head office at somewhere in the world, somewhere in the country, that's telling everyone else what to do and telling them what they want to see. And so I take this different mindset that I know 5% about these communities. I do not want to know more than that. I might be interested in it, but if I start to know more and if I try to get more involved, I'm going to try to start making decisions that will not make sense for a community. There are all these nuances, these local nuances that you don't know unless you're from there. You don't know unless you live there. And so we've tried to make it this what seems to be like a simple approach that if you're going to do something in a market, find the best people that are from there, that work there, that play there, let them be the ones and the experts that do it. So we generally depend on all of our locals to be able to tell us what's going on, what they need, what people are talking about, what they need, what they're thinking, and that happens through a simple question in an email that goes out and asking them their thoughts. Another is in-person experiences, whether it's, hey, I'm at a coffee shop, come and talk to us, or let's hold an event because you told us you want to do events. And so we're just asking a lot of questions and seeing what it is that people are looking for.
So you're having some question in the newsletter itself that's doing as a form of like crowdsourcing for something. Like
Yep.
what's a hypothetical question you might ask in a newsletter?
Hypothetical could be, well, I mean, anything. Do you eat donuts in the morning? How much coffee do you drink in the morning? They could be a little softer on that side, or it could
Uh-huh.
be a little harder. Hey, locally, we're doing municipal elections around the province. Mayor got acclaimed. What are your thoughts on that? No one else ran against him. What are your thoughts on that? So it could be kind of both sides of it. It could be not even a question, but like an invitation. Hey, I'm going to be at this coffee shop today at noon. Come by and say, hey, if you want to, and let's meet and talk in person. We've seen it now multiple times where we've got our teams. They're going to farmers markets and they're setting up a booth there, or they're going to a street festival and setting up a booth. It's just bridging that gap to say we're not just online, but there's so much more to it. And when you are both the champions and the curators of the community, you want to bring people together. So you want to see, can these online interactions be converted offline? And if they can do that, now all of a sudden you've built these ambassadors locally who care so much about what's going on, and they're going to be in your corner backing you every step of the way.
How many people do you have working for the Vancouver one?
So across Vancouver, we have, I think, 5 or 6 publications. Each
Oh,
of
so there's the
them,
what was the
Capital Daily in Victoria.
yeah.
I
Oh, sorry,
believe,
Victoria. Sorry.
I believe we have somewhere between 6 to 10 people.
Wow. Uh-huh. And so it's even though there is a daily digest, I was looking at some of the stories you forwarded. You publish like long form
Oh,
articles on the web and stuff like that.
yeah, the digest is probably the loosest way to say it. It's this combination of local curation and knowing what's happening, and that could be a link to an event, it could be a link to another news source locally, a story that's come out. It could be anything like that. But there is also a significant amount of original reporting that goes into it. And so generally, again, depending on the market, depending on the publication, we say there's really two things that we're looking for: produce the newsletter, however frequent it is, and produce at least one piece that goes out on a regular basis or a daily basis. And so in some cases, it's a profile on a business and you're discovering someone or something that you didn't know existed. On the other side, it could be we're uncovering something that's going on. And so last year we had our investigative reporter work on a story for about 3-4 months. It was a ground shattering piece that affected the community, affected so many, and that took so much time. And so
What was
we're
the piece
doing
about?
both sides of it. It was about a guy that stole a hotel. Uh, it is one of the most fascinating reads. I hope it will get turned into a movie at some point. Uh, it was a guy that went in and weaseled his way in and stole a hotel from owners.
Yeah. So I think it was maybe journalism professor Jeff Jarvis who coined the phrase "do what you do best, link to the rest." It sounds like this is that philosophy. Like it's very curational. I'm guessing you're not afraid to link to outside other local competitors and stuff like that, and then that way it frees up the journalist as much as and you see. I don't know if you saw The Verge did this too recently, where they're like, we're tired of assigning a reporter to write 500 words when someone already wrote that
Someone's
article.
written it.
So
Yeah,
so we're just going to link to that article on Bloomberg or wherever, and we'll that way we can assign our reporters to just the stuff that they could create some differentiated reporting. So it sounds like that's kind of
absolutely.
the philosophy that you
Yeah,
have, and
absolutely.
you'll have like a digest of articles, but then if there's something deeper, you'll link to that on your website.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing, when I've watched different interviews happen, and sometimes all you're thinking is like, this person's already answered this. They've answered this before, and I've watched it before. I've listened to it before. I've read it before, and so it's taking away this idea like just because it's happening doesn't mean you have to cover it, especially if someone else has covered it. So let's applaud our colleagues and our peers in the industry that are doing really good work and use that and say, look, this is another piece. We didn't write it, but we're telling you this happened. And so, in fact, we're almost like that new RSS feed in some ways for different publications because we put links to others in it, and we're sending people to different sources. I think in every newsletter, there's probably somewhere between, as a whole, I would say something like 30 to 50 links in a newsletter. Five of those are probably to different news sources. So there's a little bit of that news curation that's happening. There's a lot of community curation that's happening, and then there's a ton of original reporting.
So, unlike with the Daily Hive, where you would just launch a brand new site, you've been doing a lot of acquisitions, right, for Overstory. What's kind of that? Is it like acquisitions of legacy outlets, or is it more like I know you did just actually acquire a legacy outlet, or is it like mostly like going to local blogs and newsletters and acquiring those? Like, how are you going about it?
Yeah, it is all of the above. In some cases, I think right now we have started and launched most of our publications from scratch. Others we've acquired early stage. Others we've acquired late legacy stage. So it kind of goes down that workflow path, like I was saying before. Is there something that exists here? People are saying something's needed. Is there something that exists? If there's not, let's go create it. If there is it good enough? Can we buy it? Can we grow it? Is it good enough? And we don't need to touch it, and we don't need to get into the community, or is there something that's there and we need to start something anyways? So we're really going down this path, and it's these circles kind of that keep happening that we go around. So there's no perfect answer. I think when we started, I had this idea of, these are the 30, 40, 50 markets across Canada that I wanted to get into. And very quickly, I threw that out the window and I said, the trouble is every community we go into, there have to be the right people that can run the community and have the right skill set and have the right training. And in a lot of these markets, those people just don't exist. And so it's been a challenge. We still have one thing. We've acquired that local blog. We've acquired it, and there are no local journalists and creators that can run it. So we've put it on the back burner, and we said, okay, we'll get to this when we can, but for now, there's no one that's there. So much of the business depends on people, and the people, are the ones that are the experts. So it's different. We can't just go and hire some random person in some random city and say, okay, you're covering X market now and X community and give them content. It's doable, but that's not the right thing to do. And also, readers will see right through that. All you have to say is, you misspell something or you say the wrong term, and people know those local nuances. If you get it wrong, they know you're not a local. So I've said that one of the things with us, we are so local that it's weird, that we know these markets so well that it's weird. And the only way that you're going to know what's happening is that if you're in them. So we definitely go down that path, that it has to make sense. The people have to be there. Whether we start something or we acquire it doesn't really matter, but those people have to exist and want to give back to their community.
Well, unlike a lot of these other buzzy local news startups like 6 a.m. City or Axios, which mainly only launch in decent sized metro areas, as you mentioned, you're able to go more niche. Like you said, that you have one community that only has like 20,000 people in it. So it seems like, talk about that. Like, how are you able to go into these smaller communities, and why do you think why aren't these other companies, why don't they see an opportunity there, I wonder?
Yeah, it's all about the Benjamins, is what it comes down to. Like I said early, we look at things and ask, how much money do we need to make?
Yeah.
That changes everything that we do. So when we look at a community, and whether it's big or small, the questions are still the same. How much money is this going to cost us, and are we going to be able to make that back? And so when we're in a community and it's going to cost us, let's say, between $5,000 to $10,000 a month to run, the question becomes, can we make 10 to 15? If
Yeah.
we can do that, then we're going to go do it. But we're not coming in to say, okay, it's going to cost us 5 to 10,000 to run. Can we make 50 to 100? That
Yeah.
is that's what some of these bigger companies, I think, are thinking about, because they're looking for big returns, big profits, and they're looking, to grow really quickly and make a ton of money. So our whole reason for being is that we want to make sustainable news. We want to make sustainable communities, and so it changes up that thinking. That's not to say that we don't care about profits. That's the goal. We want to be profitable, but we want to be profitable so that we can continue investing in communities. We want to make a little bit so we can continue this thing going. We can continue growing into more markets. We can go and hire more and more people. So that's the motivation behind all of this, is sustainability number one. And if that can happen, okay, like, it's a simple numbers. How do you make $10,000 a month? Well, are there 5, 10, 15 different businesses that'll give you between 500 and 1,000 or $1,500 a month? If the answer is yes, great. Do you have readers that are local that care and would pay? Yes? Okay. What else can you do on top of that? So everything about us is, we're thinking about market share and market penetration, and we want to have that. And so we're kind of adding all these things up together to get to that end goal.
Well, let's talk about monetization. I had your VP of partnerships, Tom. He was on a recent office hours live phone call that I do with my paid subscribers for my newsletter. And he talked a little bit about the advertising strategy. And he kind of said that what you guys do is you try to get your advertisers on kind of like annual plans where they pay some kind of monthly amount, and then they get like one ad slot a month that's kind of spread out Like, what's kind of the strategy there in terms of like finding partnerships and delivering value? Because you're still mainly an advertise. You make most of your revenue through advertising, right?
Yeah, right now we want to get to the point that about 50% is coming through advertising and then about 30% is coming through paid subscriptions. I think depending on the brand, depending on the publication, that'll vary. Some will be only advertising and other things. Some will be mainly paid subscriptions. It goes back to the thing I just said. It's about those numbers in place. And so what we try to do is flip the switch and reverse engineer it and say, if we need to make $600,000 a year in order to make something run sustainable, get to profitability, we need to make $50,000 a month. In order to make 50,000, how much of it can come from advertising? How much of it can come from paid subscription? So you work out those numbers and you say, okay, based on this, we need to make, let's say, 30 grand a month in advertising. That means we need a certain combination of partners on board who can give us an amount and say, okay, here it is. I came from a place where we used to have hundreds of advertisers on a monthly basis, and we sold and sold and sold. And inventory could always change, it could always grow. And the beauty with the newsletters is that there's only so much inventory there. So right away you say, okay, if I've got a daily newsletter that goes out 20 to 22 weekdays every single month, that means that I've got 20 to, let's say 20 ad spots available if I just do one ad spot in the newsletter. If that's the case, I need to make, let's say, $1,000 per day. Is that possible? Maybe, but what if you spread that out over 2 placements or 3 placements in the newsletter, and you change up your price points, and you had one that was at $1,000, one that's at 500, one that's at 250. All of a sudden, you can make 1750 per newsletter versus just 1,000 that you need. Okay, and so you're just working those numbers. So all of them are different. We come in with the same thinking that how much do we need to make, and then how much can we sell? But it's also this thinking that we don't want to have these bloated advertising teams and sales teams. So right now across the company, we have, I think, just over 50 people right now, and 2/3 of them are editorial. We don't want to have these giant sales teams, like I said. So we're thinking of it in a bit of a different way, that rather than selling volume, and the opposite would be going and playing the volume game. All right, we've got 22 newsletters per month, which means that, okay, let's say there's 3 advertising spots. All right, now we've got 66 per month. That means we need 66 things sold per month. Oh, I'm already like starting to think in my mind, spinning, thinking that's going to be so much work, so much administration. You probably need 2 salespeople. You probably need 2 coordinators. Now your one local market needs 4 people just on the sales team. Those 4 people are going to cost you, let's say, on a low level, let's just say 50,000, which is way too low. But let's say it's 50,000. Already your sales team, right in that one local market, needs to make $200,000 per year. Then you've got your editorial staff and your marketing and social and all of that. All of a sudden, your numbers become bloated, almost impossible to make. So now your advertising has to become $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month. And when you're going and talking to locals who are in smaller markets who don't have big ad budgets, they're going to say, "What do you mean I have to spend $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 for one ad? Like, that doesn't make any sense. I don't have the money." All of a sudden, you've priced out your locals. You have to turn to agencies. You have to be thinking bigger. Now, your national partners are saying, and national ad agencies are coming and saying, "We only care about eyeballs. We want to know impressions. We want to know these sort of things." I don't want to deal with that stuff. So change it up completely and say, okay, we have 20 spots available. That's it. Well, what if we made 20 spots annually? What if those annual spots were at 20, 30,000 bucks a year? Okay, so we sell 20 of those at 20,000. We make $400,000 a year in advertising, maybe another 100, 200,000 in paid subscriptions, maybe another 50 to 100 in events, in merchandise and things like that. Okay, and all of a sudden you've got a $600,000 number, which goes back to that 50 grand a month that we need to make. All right, there we go. Yeah. We're sustainable, simple. So everything is with this mindset. How do we be simple? How do we not spend crazy amounts and bloat ourselves? If we can do that, I think we can succeed.
There's also something like wonderful and elegant about selling scarcity. I do that with my own newsletter. Is like I have a maximum of one sponsor per newsletter, so I only have to sell one sponsor per week. And Also, because it's only one sponsor, you're maximizing ROI for that sponsor because they're not competing with a
Hmm.
lot of other crap in the newsletter. And then yeah, you could sell like, and then you're thinking of, and this is what I'm trying to do more of, is like, how do I sell just a bunch of those ad slots at once? And before you know it, you could have 6 months of inventory sold
Yeah.
out, not with only like a handful
Yeah.
of advertisers. Like you said, you're not trying to nickel and dime getting 200 different advertisers. You're just
Yeah.
trying to get 20 different
Yeah.
advertisers and get them to put
Yeah.
down some bulk amount or
Yeah.
something like
Well, and
that.
the beauty of it is that by doing that, you actually get to focus on quality. And so what you're saying is that because you only have so much, because there's the scarcity factor, which 100% agree with, but because there's only so much to sell, we are going to be a little bit picky and choosy with who we work with. It means that we can provide a higher level of customer service towards those clients. It means that we actually have true partners who care about what we do, not just sponsors who are giving us money. So it's the fundamental difference that we want to work with certain types of people. And when you have 20 ad spots, what that means is that at a local level, we only need one or two realtors. We don't want to work with 10. That doesn't make any sense. Now all of a sudden, when as a reader, you're really thinking about trust. So if I'm the publisher, the publication, and we're putting 10 realtors in front of you, what you're telling me, the reader, is that you don't really care who you're working with. It means that you're just taking as much money as you can. If you're working with two different phone providers or telecom providers, which one is better? Doesn't matter. You don't care because you're just putting it in front of us and showing that you're just trying to make money. So because of that, we become really picky and choosy. We have 20, 30 different categories, and we say you could get category exclusivity because we don't need more of these. We don't need more. So it changes that way of thinking. It's a very big learning curve, especially for some of the advertisers and the partners that we're looking to onboard. But the beauty is that once they get it, and they realize and see it, and they say, "You're telling me that I'm the only one. I'm the only auto dealer. I'm the only grocery store. I'm the only jeweler. I'm the only like coffee shop and whatever. You're the only one. You're the only one that we care about." And because of that, you get these really deep connections within the community, and you start to think like, what's the next thing that we can do here? How can we continue growing together? So it just changes the way that you think. It simplifies everything down, and it allows you to really focus on quality.
It also allows you to create like a sense of FOMO because, when you have a million ad slots, they can just drag their feet forever. But when you're like,
Yeah.
well, the train's leaving the station,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
there are 20 slots open, and same thing with my newsletter is like I'm booked 2 or 3 months out in advance. It's like,
There's not.
well,
There's
if you
nothing you can
want
do.
yeah, if you want to, you better get on it now and buy up as many slots as you can, or you're just never going to get the
Yeah.
opportunity. So there's some nice synergies with that. Since you started expanding, have you been able to start appealing to like more national and international brands now that you have that kind of reach yet, or is that still on the
Yeah.
horizon?
Um, it's a bit of both. We have it. It's a little bit on the horizon as well. We also are going to effectively cap it at a certain point. So any local publication that we have ideally has no more than 25% national, because we do want to keep that community connection. We do want people to know of this as local. And so if, in your newsletter, if you were putting an ad in there from an international company that didn't really make sense, but just wanted eyeballs, that wouldn't really matter. Like your readers are going to say, Simon, what are you doing here? So we're thinking of it in that same sort of way, that what is the ultimate value for readers? And if we're going to put an ad in there, first of all, because it's all on conversions and because it's all on those metrics, if the conversions are not there and there's an advertiser in there that doesn't make any sense, you're never going to see the conversions. They're not going to want to spend with you. So now all of a sudden we're hurting ourselves, we're hurting the brand, we're hurting the readers. It's got to be this nice win-win-win across the board where it all comes back to that value proposition.
So, what are you offering for paid subscriptions? Because I get the sense that a lot of local news publishers, instead of having like a strict paywall, they're trying to do this kind of civic duty type of guilt messaging, like keep our journalism free, support local journalism. What's kind of how are you driving those subscriptions?
Yeah, so we've got a couple right now, a couple more coming, and they vary. So we've got one that offers right now free access is you get twice a week newsletter and a little bit, you get all the content on the website. Become a paid member and you get a daily email, you get early access to events, discounts to events, you get access to this different level of community. That's like one offering. Another one that we have gets you some merchandise, gets you early access to events, discounts from partners. What else? There's one level I know has like an annual impact report as well. So it's this world where we're trying to find that right balance. We have a large number of readers, generally in most communities, that say, I love the work that you do. I want to support you. I just want to give you some money. And then there's other people who say, I like the work you do. I want to support you, but I also want something out of this. And here in Canada, there is a federal tax credit for individuals that is a subscription tax credit that effectively it's like you need to have a paywall in order to get it. So we're trying to now find that balance as well. It's a 15% individual tax credit. So if you spend $100, you get $15 back. And so we're trying to see like what can we do to satisfy those needs without having to go and implement a paywall. The others, we've got a weekly insider email that goes out. So the daily email is generally more newsy, weekly events. So really, like we're playing around with it. We're asking a lot of questions. I don't think there is one perfect solution, and I don't know if there needs to be. We've got one of our communities that we're going to be launching a paid subscription soon, and it skews older. So it's like, I think average age or majority is above the age of 55. Majority of those people are saying, I support you. You are doing phenomenal work that no one else is doing. The reporting you do literally saves lives. I just want to support you. So we're thinking, okay, if that's all you want to do, and there's hundreds of you and thousands of you that are saying that, what can we give you to satisfy that and allow you to come into help support? So it's asking a lot of questions, talking to people, also adapting as you go, knowing that not everything's going to be perfect, and you're going to try something, you're going to see if it works, and if it doesn't, you're going to adapt and change.
Yeah, I'm still, I'm almost heading into 3 years to running my own paid newsletter, and I still can't, I'm still just figuring new things out. And because I feel like the motivations are all over the place to become a subscriber. Like, I think my subscribers, probably about 70% of their motivation is they just want to support me and the work that I'm doing. So in that case, I don't want to put too much stuff behind a paywall or spend too much time to that, because that limits my audience growth.
Yeah. Well, it was, I saw you, I think you tweeted or you posted and you said, you had this thing that like people think that they already subscribed or they're paying. And I was one of those people, and I was like, oh, damn. I love his stuff. I read his stuff. I thought I was paying for this.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Or they don't have any concept of what's behind the paywall and what's in front of the paywall. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so, 70% is they just want to support me. And then the 30% is the extra perks they get. And so I'm starting to figure out what are those extra perks. And I think I've really been leaning into these live office hours calls as being really effective in terms of driving that value. But it's especially at the local level, you see that like the public is somewhat, especially in the US, I don't know the situation in Canada as much. You're seeing constant reporting about news deserts, and the local journalism is failing, and so a lot of outlets get away with that messaging, like support local journalism. Unless you want to be a news desert, you need to actually help pay for this, and it's somewhat effective in terms of driving subscriptions, so they don't have to put too much stuff behind a paywall.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen so many of those, and the more I see, the more I hear people are struggling, because that message, it's not a hopeful message. It's this, save us. If you don't save us, we're going to die. There isn't much hope around that. And so we're trying to do the complete opposite of that, saying, like, look at what we've done already. Look at the stories. If you want to support us, support us. Like, we need the help.
Yeah.
That story about the man who stole a hotel was, like I said, one of the biggest stories I think that we've ever produced, that our team has produced. It's won national awards. We ended up getting sued by the guy who stole the hotel, which we had a feeling.
Yeah.
He's a notorious for suing people. Went to court, and through that process, we realized this is going to cost us a lot more money than we thought. It's not all insured and or covered by insurance. Okay, this is like outside the scope here, guys. We don't have tens of thousands of dollars extra to spend on this. So what did we do? We went to readers and we said that very same message. Here's the story. You read it. You loved it. You shared it. Here's what's happening in the situation. Now we need some help because we did not budget for this, and we don't think we know it's not going to be all covered. So we ended up putting that call out, and over 2 weeks, we had tens of thousands of dollars come in from readers who said, I love what you do. I want to support you, and just gave us like a one-time contribution. And then we had probably about the other half that said, I love what you do, and now I'm on board to become a paying member. So like they need something behind it. I think this idea that support the journalism, otherwise we're going to fail and we're going to die and we're going to be able to do this, I don't think it's the right message. I can't see it working that much, especially like younger generations. If you come and you tell me like just support what I do, I'm like, you know, I don't buy into that, not that much, especially when, you know, money is tight and everyone's looking at their credit card statements and they're seeing what is this recurring $10, $15 a month thing that I keep paying for. But if you can give them something, so I love your office hours and what you do, I still have to come to one. But just that idea that there's a community there and you're talking about stuff, to me, that's totally worthwhile, especially with someone who's in the industry. So we're taking that same sort of approach. We do that. We've got an industry publication, a tech publication, and we take the very same approach as well.
What you're doing, what you did with that lawsuit, reminds me of what the Discourse, which is another network of local news sites in Canada, do. Is they will poll their audience, their local audience, like once a year or something like that, and say, here are like 5 different stories we're thinking of pursuing. Which one do you think we should work on? And then they whatever gets the most votes, they pursue that story, they report on it, and then 6 months later they send out an email and saying, hey, we actually reported on this. And then that's when they make the ask for memberships and stuff. Like, yeah, now give us money. We did what you asked, now give us money. So that they showed the impact of the dollars, and they also like show what the money's actually going towards. So like this amount, this pays for a reporter, this pays for an audio producer, yada yada yada, so that they can see the breakdown of where their money's going. So what do you centralize? What kind of efficiencies are driven by the parent company?
Yeah, so generally like admin, HR, finance, that's the big one. Some marketing, some sales. There's more marketing. Sales is generally from like more of a strategy standpoint, and then overseeing different people at that local regional level. I think that's it. Like design development, things like that. But that's pretty much it. Most of it is on the ground content, reporting, anything to do with the actual production is all on the ground.
So let's zoom out for my final question or two, and talk about just the state of the local news. Obviously, especially in the US, people have been pretty pessimistic about it. I have a lot of local news people who listen to this podcast, both on the legacy side and the startup side. What's your view on the state of local news? Like whenever I interview people like that, they say they're optimistic. They're finding models that work, but the what are some of the takeaways? Like I seem to that for me it is you need to be leaner. You don't even necessarily need to have like office space. You don't need like 50 vice presidents who are doing who knows what. Like you just need to have your reporters and then some support structures in place. What is your kind of view on like the state of local media and where it's heading in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, this idea, that local is dying or local is dead and its revival, I think the problem is we as an industry, we keep saying these things. So we as an industry have to change that narrative that there is hope. Like you look at the hundreds of publications that have launched in the past few years, and you look at that and say there are people trying. Now, the trying and succeeding is those are two very different things, but I think it's this idea that that there is so much opportunity here. Uh, when we look at communities, and I overuse the word communities, I know, but when we look at them, we're thinking, how small can we go? That communities don't have to be giant cities and have to be giant provinces and states and nationwide and things like that. There's a very different way of thinking about it. That one person can start a newsroom in their community and just say, I'm going to start talking about stuff that's happening. And once I start talking about it, I'm going to put out a weekly newsletter. And then it's going to become twice a week. And I'm just going to tell people what's happening. We have that in one of our communities. It's got about, I think, a population 80,000, and our editor there is taking that same approach. Like, I'm just going to go talk about stuff. Whether you want to come along for the ride or you don't, that's up to you. But this is missing from the community. You're all telling me it's missing, so we're going to go do this. And we see the numbers and we see it coming in, and you see that no one is unsubscribing from this because they know that it's necessary. We just acquired this legacy publication in Vancouver called The Georgia Straight. It's been around for 55 years. It's gone in all different sorts of directions, but our goal, we said, is that it used to be an arts and culture publication. It started becoming cannabis and esports and all of this sort of stuff. Owners wanted to try to make money. And we went and we said, we're going to focus it back on arts and culture. And I am shocked and awed at just how many people have come and said, thank you. We're so excited about this. And like thousands of people have come and said that. And so all it tells me is that we have to think about things a little bit differently. We have to think about, what does the community want and need? Let's talk to them. Let's ask them those questions. Let's figure out what is it that drives them and motivates them. Let's have those conversations with them. That we can't just be this one-way communication. And that was one of the things I noticed even at the big newspaper chain that I worked for, is like very much one way. We're going to tell you what's happening, and that's it. There's a wall in place. And so breaking down that barrier, knowing that it's not enough to just do good journalism is another big piece of it. Knowing that everyone's motivations are different, reader motivations are different, what people want to support, what they don't want to support. And so taking all of these things into account. Short answer though, I am so hopeful. We are betting big time on local, on community news, that over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, I ask the questions, where are people going to get their local news from? How are they going to know what's happening locally? I look at the pandemic and I think the pandemic taught us that we know absolutely nothing about what's happening in our own backyards. I know what's happening on the other side of the world. I have no idea what's happening in my 5-block radius. I don't even know the people who are most of my neighbors. But yet I can target millions of people on social and I can put ads in front of them. But I can't go knock on the doors of my neighbors because I don't know who they are. So it's this fundamental thinking that needs to shift and say, let's start caring again about our neighbors. Let's start caring about locals. Let's start caring about the things that are happening in our own backyards. Let's be hopeful of it. Let's really streamline it down to think about what is it that people want and need, what is going to fill their lives, but ultimately what's going to bring value to them. What's going to bring value from a content perspective, what's going to bring value from an advertiser perspective. And if we can put all those things together and take this mindset that maybe news isn't a place that's going to make tons and tons of money. Maybe it shouldn't be a place that's going to make tons and tons of money. If we can take all of those things in mind, I think when we can be successful, and hopefully we can be sitting here 5 years down the road, and we can still be operating, and we can still be doing this, and we can have that conversation of what that looks like and what the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years is going to look like.
Yeah, all these, like, a lot of these publications that are hemorrhaging jobs are owned by like hedge funds, private equity funds that need very massive profit margins, and they're siphoning that off. But I think I don't know if there's an exact rule of thumb, but I think like if all you're looking to do is just make a salary for yourself, like a community as small as like 10 to 20,000 people could probably support one journalist and one business person, so like a two-person team for like a local newsletter or something like that.
Yeah,
And I think we're
or
going to see a lot more people, a lot more little mini publications like that that are building like middle class incomes for
yeah.
a
Well,
small number of
I
people.
think you said it recently. There's all of these people that are being let go and laid off, and when they're thinking about coming together, the thing that I thought about was that I know the business side of it, and I know how to make that work. What I need help with is I need the journalism and the local reporting. So we go and we say, look, as a reporter, as an editor, you produce. You add a little bit on the community side. We'll work with you. We'll train you. We'll talk with you, and we'll do that. But you make the best stories, and you focus on the best reporting. If you can do that, you're making my job easier. And now we're putting both sides of those things together. I you know I think it becomes really hard to do like a local reporter, editor, and a business person. But what makes it a little bit easier is, like in our case, we're looking at it thinking a little more regionally, that maybe that one business person isn't just for one publication, maybe they're for two or three. Maybe that cost then goes from X to X minus zero point 0.3. And so those numbers change, but everything for us is, yeah, how do we create sustainability? I hate the idea that reporters are generally underpaid. And so really thinking about what does that future look like, where we can pay people well, number one, but as we succeed and as we get to profitability, how do we pay people more? And whether it's through bonuses or whatever, how do we give them more? They're the ones that are creating. If they create something that's successful, they should be the first ones to reap the rewards. And whether that's, hey, you get more money, or you want to go somewhere, or you want another team member, whatever that looks like. But let's think of it from that mindset, and just think, how do we change this? Because it clearly hasn't been working. And the way that the past 10, 20, 30 years have gone is proof that that's not working. So let's think about how that changes.
Okay, Farhan, those were all the questions I had for you. Where can people find you online?
Awesome. Overstorymedia.com. They can find me, Farhan Mohamed, on pretty much everything: Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Farhan at overstorymedia.com is my email, and I answer most things that come into my inbox.
Awesome. Well, this is a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me.
Awesome. Thanks so much.